there are talks about changing the way we vote this November. Some propose an online or mail-in vote, but the unreliable tech could put our elections at risk. Joining me now is tech expert Dave Hatter to tell us how using technology to cast your ballot may put your information at risk. Good morning, Dave. Thanks for joining us. Dave, I guess one reason people are concerned about online voting is because current computerized systems, whether they're online or not, seem to be at risk, right?
Exactly, and thanks for having me, John. Yeah, as I think you don't have to look too far in any news source to see that there are hacks taking place all the time. And the idea that you'd have an election where it's a unique process, right? You need to have secret ballots, but at the same time, you need to be able to audit that, right? So that you can make sure that it's a valid process. So yeah, it's a tricky situation.
Typically, what do we find that's vulnerable in the computerization, the tech that's with our voting right now?
Yeah, so there's a lot of electronic voting systems out there already, and every year there's a big hacker convention out in Vegas called DEF CON. They have something called Voting Village, and they bring these machines in, and literally, this is not an exaggeration, they've had 11-year-old kids break into these things in several hours. So the existing systems are old, in many cases obsolete, and they have a lot of problems. And each state does their own thing. Each state has its own board of elections. They're responsible for these machines. So even existing systems have a lot of problems, and that's why a lot of experts continue to say that there's no way to vote online safely and securely and ensure the validity of an election, and that Congress needs to put more money into this, and the states need to step up and continue to focus on paper ballots for the time being, or at least machines that can create a paper record of your vote.
Do you think that there's any way to address all of these different things? And you just gave us a laundry list of things that could go wrong. Is there any way that these things can be addressed, and eventually one day we may have online voting?
I think at some future point, yes, but not anytime in the near future. Most experts who really looked at this say this isn't going to happen. It's not going to be reliable for decades, because there's so many moving parts to the election process. Again, this idea of secret ballot versus auditability, the fact that the internet is sort of inherently insecure. You know, right now, in light of the pandemic and what we've seen with elections, I think the best thing that's probably going to happen is you could use the internet to make ballots available to people, but even that then potentially opens you up for phishing or misinformation online where they tell you to turn your ballot in on the wrong day. So I don't think we're going to see any sort of realistic online voting anytime soon. Until we get to a place where you can absolutely positively identify someone and ensure that their ballot has only been cast once, I don't think we're going to get there. It's a big problem. Thankfully, people are looking at it. Things like Voter Village are raising awareness about it. But I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon, because if you can't guarantee the validity of it, well, then where does that leave us?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
a final question for you.
I don't think so.
A final question for you, Dave, and that is for the things that we have that pose a risk right now, what are tech people suggesting that we do to try to secure our elections?
Well, part of it is upgrading these voting machines, getting rid of some of these obsolete systems. In many cases, they're 15, 20 years old. You have a lot of states that have a lot of legacy systems. I mean, we've seen this issue with the unemployment checks, right? They can't get them out because many of these systems are so old they can't even find programmers to work on these things. So, I think each state plus the federal government, even though they're not ultimately responsible for these state election systems, need to focus on ensuring that the existing systems that people currently vote with are secure and brought up to some kind of modern standard, which is still not the case in many cases. And then, figure out a way in the future, because obviously more and more things are becoming virtual and turning digital. I think we'll get there eventually, but we're just not there yet. So more money needs to be spent and more effort needs to be devoted to making sure that the existing systems are good, with a sort of a roadmap for how do we get there in the future for online voting.
All right, and back it all up with paper ballots.
There you go, exactly.
All right, Dave Hatter, thank you so much for your advice.